I am in my parents' cold cellar in their basement where they store all their potatoes that they harvested in the fall and they keep here all winter. So my mom gave me a call and she said, you have to come and get some potatoes. They're starting to sprout. We can't eat them all and you got to help us eat them all. So I'm here to get some potatoes and I have a special plan for these potatoes, as I always do, because we can't let this go to waste. So let me grab some potatoes and then I'll show you what I'll be doing with them. So I'm back from my mother's house with my bag of potatoes and I know exactly what I want to do with them. I am not one to let things go to waste, so I am going to pressure can these. I am going to preserve these for long-term storage, long-term use. Remember, we always need to pressure can our low acid foods, which most of those end up being vegetables, stews, meats, low acid. Only safe way to preserve these are by pressure canning. Now, why would you ever pressure can or store potatoes in a jar? Why not? Whatever are we going to be doing with potatoes in a jar stored? So we can use these for quick meal preps. We can use these to make mashed potatoes, pan fries, so many uses. You'll have a meal ready in no time with potatoes in a jar. You open a jar of potatoes, open a jar of your stored vegetables, protein on the side, and there you go. Quick meal. First thing we are going to do with our potatoes is that we're going to peel them and we're going to cut them up in larger size pieces. If your potatoes are fairly small, maybe like this one, you can maybe leave them this size. But if your potatoes are a little bit bigger, maybe like this, you can cut them up a little bit. You can even cut them in 2-inch size pieces. The important thing to remember here is that your potatoes are pretty much all the same size. So let's get started. I've always had the habit of peeling my potatoes with a knife. I know a lot of people do these with vegetable peelers. Whatever is your way to do it is fine. You want to make sure you have a bowl of cold water, so as soon as you're done removing the peel, that you put your potatoes in the cold water to prevent your potatoes from turning brown. So we're going to make our way through our potatoes, peeling them all. The quantity of potatoes that you peel is completely up to you. That'll all depend on how many jars of potatoes that you like to have in your storage. I have peeled and cut up all my potatoes. I have left them in larger pieces. I also put a pot on the stove to warm up because we do need to boil these potatoes. If you've cut them in larger pieces like I have, they need to boil for 10 minutes. If you have about 2-inch pieces, you only want them to boil for 2 minutes. You don't want them to cook through. These need to be processed using the hot pack method. I don't talk a lot about hot packs and raw packs because usually when I can get away with it, I will always do a raw pack. I won't cook my vegetables or anything in advance if I don't have to. I feel it's an added step that doesn't necessarily have to be done. But for the potatoes, it doesn't say I can do a raw pack. So I guess I'm going to do a hot pack. So now all I'm going to do is wash my potatoes well. My water's boiling. I'm going to put those potatoes in and start them cooking. Hopefully I can get them all in one batch. I don't quite think I can. I still have them soaking in water. My potatoes are boiling. Let's time this for 10 minutes. And I'm going to bring down the heat a little bit. All right, my potatoes have boiled for 10 minutes. I'm going to turn off the stove and we need to carefully drain these potatoes. Be careful, don't burn yourself. I do have my pressure canner heating up on the stove beside my potatoes. We want to make sure to drain this liquid. We can't use it, but I'm going to reuse this pot, fill it back up with water because we need to have some clean water, boiled hot water to fill the jars once we put our potatoes in. I'm going to reuse the bowl that I originally had my potatoes in and put the cover on top because I need them to stay hot, and refill my pot and get that boiling. I just wanted to give you a small update on the Bernardin cat. These are the cats that you put on top of your jars when you're canning. So the Ball brand of canning supplies had said quite a long time ago that you no longer needed to heat your caps, but the Bernardin kept saying that they that they needed to be heated. They still hadn't changed their position. So I was looking on the website recently and saw that you no longer have to heat your caps as long as they're room temperature. So yay for that. And it's great. We're going to move with technology. Things change. We update our practices. We always want to make sure that we're staying up to date and staying safe. So I will not be heating my caps anymore, but I will be washing them. So just wanted to give you a quick update on that. My water's now hot. My potatoes are still hot, and my canner is warming up. My jars are hot from the dishwasher. So we're going to start filling our jars. We need to fill our jars, leaving 1-inch head space. So fill the jars with the potatoes, then fill the jars with the water, then backfill with water, leaving 1-inch head space. Now you can do pint-sized jars or you can do quart-sized jars. So these are pint-sized jars, so they're 500 milliliter or 2 cups. Or you can do quart-size, which are the 1 liter jars. I'm going to be adding half a teaspoon of pickling salt. Remember, we're canning these, so you can't use regular salt because they have a caking agent in them. Could make an unsafe product, so always use your pickling salt for canning. So half a teaspoon. If you're using the quart-sized jars, you can add the entire teaspoon. So we're going to fill this up, leaving 1-inch headspace. Once you've added your liquid, you want to go in with your debubbler to make sure that there's not any air bubbles caught in the bottom of your jars. And then you readjust your liquids if you need to. Always remembering to keep your 1-inch headspace. As usual, we're going to wash the rims of our jars because we want our caps to seal properly. We're washing the rim of our jars with water. Put your caps on your jars, and then you're going to put your rings on just fingertip tight. Once we've got our rings on, we will transfer our jars over to our canner and continue filling the rest of our jars. I have enough jars for more than 1 row, so I've got 9 jars on my bottom row. So I have an extra rack, if you want to call it that you need to put in between your rows. You can't place your jars directly one on top of the other, but you can place your jars on top of the second rack. So I'm going to put my second rack on top so I can add more bottles. There's nothing more satisfying when you have a pretty full canner. Makes it all worth it. So you should invest in getting another one of those. It's so great when you have an almost full canner. The only thing better than that would be to have a completely full canner, but I'm not that short. It's pretty full. So now I'm turning up the heat, putting it close to high, putting the cover on, and sealing my canner. Now we need to heat this up. Bring it up to the appropriate pressure for my altitude. I have to bring this to 11 pounds of pressure. And once it's at 11 pounds of pressure, then we process our potatoes in the pint-sized jars for 35 minutes. If you use quart-sized jars, you process for 40 minutes. Okay, our pot is getting really hot. We've got a lot of steam coming out of the vent pipe. The little button has popped up. And so now we're going to vent our pot for 10 minutes. Okay, now that my pot has vented for 10 minutes, we're going to start building up the pressure. Remember, we haven't started timing yet. So we'll put this on the vent pipe. Gets quiet. And now the pressure is going to start to build up. So we watch our gauge. And when I get to 10 pounds of pressure, I am going to time for 35 minutes. I'm not quite at 11 pounds of pressure yet. I am rounding 9 pounds. But I do want to slightly decrease the heat a little bit. Now, when I say slightly, I'm not saying going from almost high temperature to halfway. It's more like a tiny little notch, just so it doesn't start to boil out of control, because if you leave it at high until you hit 11 pounds of pressure, you might have a little bit of a hard time controlling it and keeping it in that 11 pounds of pressure. So always try to monitor your pressure and lower it a little bit before you get to the maximum pressure. And remember, if you drop your temperature too quick and your temperature goes below what the pressure needs to be for your altitude, so me, it's 11. So let's say I lower my pressure and then I look at my gauge and I'm down to 10. I have to increase the heat again and I have to restart the processing time. So even if I'm 15 minutes in, I have to restart at 35 minutes. So it's really important to keep an eye on your pressure and keep it where it needs to be. I'm almost at 11 pounds of pressure now. The weighted gauge is starting to rock back and forth, so my dial gauge is pretty accurate. My canner is done. It's processed for 35 minutes. I'm going to turn off the heat. And because I have something cooking on the stove, I'm just going to leave my canner where it is. Now, it's really important that you leave everything as it is. It has to depressurize on its own. Don't put it in your sink. Don't run cold water on it. Please let it depressurize on its own. The dial is going to go down to 0, and this is going to drop. And when that happens, you can remove the weighted gauge. Wait 10 minutes and then open your cover. So we have to let that happen naturally. The button has dropped. The dial is at 0. So now we can take off the weighted gauge, and we have to wait 10 more minutes before we can take off the cover. We're getting there. 10 minutes are up. We can take the cover off. But we still have to leave it one more 10 minutes before we can take them out of the pot. I have ended up with 15 jars of potatoes. I am so happy. Remember, you have to let them cool on your countertop for 24 hours. Don't move them. Let them rest for 24 hours before you store them. Once the 24 hours are up, you can remove your rings. Never store them with the rings on top. It could cause a false seal and make an unsafe product. Never stack them as well, one on top of the other. You always have to leave them on a single layer unless you have a shelf and there's no weight on top of your jars. You should also mark what's in your jar and the date that you made it in case you forget. Sometimes when you start getting a lot of stuff in your canning pantry, you forget when you made it and exactly what it is that you have in that jar. Your processed jars can stay in a cool, dark, dry environment for up to a year. They stay good for a really long time. I hope you enjoyed my video. I hope you enjoy the content. If you do, give it a big thumbs up. Don't be shy. Hit that subscribe button and be sure to check back again soon.